Well, each week I see a few faces returning that haven't been here before. So tell your friends to come on back. We're here. Now I'm going to ask you to join me in lighting the chalice. So if you look at your own service, you can say these words with me. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
strange is our situation here upon earth. Each of us comes for a short visit, not knowing why, yet sometimes seeming to a divine purpose. From the standpoint of daily life, however, there's one thing we do know, that we are here for the sake of others, for the countless unknown souls with whose fate we are connected by a bond of sympathy. Many times a day I realize how much my outer and inner life is built upon the labors of people, both living and dead, and how earnestly I must exert myself in order to give in return as much as I have received. Albert Einstein. Those are the words that invite us into a special focus of the Day of the Dead for us this Sunday. We will be drawing some of our attention to that in some opening remarks, as well as in comments, pictures that are in front of us. And those of you who wish to share some things, I know Pamela Green has a poem that she will be reading to us a little bit later. But I want to welcome you here. Those of you who have made your way here for the first or second time, thank you for trusting us with a couple hours of your week. You will find here that we are an incredibly amazing, loving, and receiving congregation. Probably so much so that you may not even believe it until you've been here enough times to experience it. So I want you to know that in fact we are what you see. We are WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get, and what you will get is an awful lot of love and compassion. So welcome here. I'm wondering if on this half of the congregation, if there are first or second time visitors that would be willing to stand and introduce yourself. And on my left, your right side of the congregation, are there first or second time visitors that would like to introduce themselves. For those of you who know better, you're here for a reason, and we welcome you. Thank you for being back. I see more and more faces coming back in. Some of the delightful people from the Canadian North have managed to make their way back. Betsy, Mike, and there are others who are morphing their way back into our community. Welcome to Change This Metamorphosis. One announcement I'd like to be able to give to you is that the small group dinners continue to go on. The last Sunday to sign up and place in the bin in the vestibule. Where? The vestibule. Lynn Nordenborg. Lynn, would you raise your hand? So if you want to talk with her about small groups, that's the woman to do so. Thank you. Clay, I think you have an announcement, and David, I know you do too.
Good morning. Good morning. How many had a chance to look at the new website? Cool. Thank you. We're looking for people who will be willing to do testimonials, short ones, 10 seconds, about what the UU faith means to you. This will be incorporated into our website. And Susan, who's back over here, she'll be doing those on her iPhone. So if you feel brave and you want to be on TV, please see Susan. Thank you.
Thank you. David, I know you have a word to say, Susan.
Well, also about the website. So those of you, like Mike and Betsy, welcome back. Good to see you, Mike. Those of you that occasionally view the service live stream, we're not on Facebook anymore. So you can go directly to our website. I'm watching it right here, testing it, first day, making sure everything is working good. UULowcountry.org. If you go on during the week, you'll see a timer on there that says the next live stream will begin in X amount of days, X amount of hours, X amount of minutes, and so on and so forth. Once that reaches 0, that top little bar there will change, and there'll be a Watch Now button. You click the Watch Now button, and you're there. You're right at the screen there. Okay? So we're not using that other service anymore. We'll see how this works out here. Secondly, the member portal on the new website, certain pieces of that are password protected. So in your order of service, you see my email address for the office admin here, uucl.office@gmail.com. If you are a member, you have the ability to access the directory and other things. So if you need that new password, just email me and I will issue that password to you. Okay, that's it. Thank you, Charlie.
I had to smile at David's reference to that other platform. No name mentioned, right? So I wanted to share with you the opening remarks from several years ago concerning the Day of the Dead and its annual November holiday that combines a number of different thoughts and traditions. Peter Morales writes these words. He says, unlike Halloween, where the dead are seen as frightening, the Mexican holiday honors and remembers them with 2 days of feasting, religious parades, rites, and sometimes fireworks. And a part of the genius of the Dia de los Muertos is the way it mixes celebration and mourning, like a good UU memorial service. It both affirms life and gives us a chance to share our grief. In rural Mexico, the holiday involves placing mementos, pictures, flowers, or favorite foods of the deceased on the home altar. Many families also keep all-night candlelit vigils in graveyards where their loved ones are buried. If we dismiss the Day of the Dead as superstition, we can easily miss the profound spiritual and psychological insight that makes this tradition powerful. A Mexican boy spends the night at his uncle's grave, has a connection across time with his forebears that we and our children do not. We are connected to the World Wide Web, but have cut ourselves off from the web of time. Traditional cultures have understood intuitively something that we've repressed or have forgotten. The dead don't die, they live on. Look in the mirror. The DNA of your ancestors is alive in you. Look at your children, grandchildren, and see yourself. The choices your ancestors made shaped your life, and the choices we make every day shape the lives of those to come. The interconnections stretch across time. This is what the Day of the Dead reminds us of, and this is its power. The idea is not to mimic the Mexican tradition, but to draw from its wisdom. When we allow ourselves to feel our place along the continuum of life and death, it sharpens our sense of being alive and our connection to one another. The Day of the Dead is a celebration of life. Welcome to it today. Neal, your opening words, please, and welcome back to our fellowship.
Thank you, Charlie, and thank you for those words from Peter Morales. It's good to be back with you. Our opening words come from Callie Gassa, and she writes, look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. I've been asked to issue a warning about our opening hymn. It's number 359 in our hymnal. When we are gathered, the warning is this. We'll be singing the lyrics out of the hymnal, but not those musical notes. So please follow the lead of our pianist, and let us stand as we sing.
respect for the independent web, all citizens of which we are a part, to accept and encourage one another in our free pursuit of truth, meaning, and spiritual growth, to gather in peace and love, to affirm the inherent worth and dignity of all people and all life, to promote justice, equity, and compassion in all aspects of life and living, to respect the right of conscience, and to support the use of the democratic process in the pursuit of peace, liberty, and justice for all. This we covenant with each other. Okay, two things to do. This is our chance to give back. So the first thing I want to remind you about is if you brought anything to the Sandalwood Food Pantry, you can place it in the large bin back between the two doors. And if you didn't bring anything today, search through your pantry, see what you can find that you're willing to share with others. That's ready. Check the dates. You may have some stuff that could come here. Sandalwood Food Pantry. Now, the second giving is us giving to the church. And I reminded myself, my goodness, I pledge and then I pay it over each month. And I forgot October, and here's November. And so Lynn and I reminded each other. And so I'm going to put October and November's pledge into the basket today. And you all can join in and give whatever you will. Thank you for your generosity.
Elvira Brody writes for Newsweek, recalls that every year during her childhood, the mother made what she called her Easter pies. She says they looked like omelets and were stuffed with fresh ricotta and Romano cheese, sliced smoked ham and hot sausage, topped with a heavy, flaky crust, and baked golden brown. Her mom learned how to make them from her mom, who brought the family recipe over from their hometown near Naples. When Elvira was little, her mom and grandmom made them together. But after her grandmom died, it was just her mom. Elvira says she can still picture her mom in their kitchen, pressing out the dough with her grandmother's rolling pin, her cheeks smudged with flour, her hair in disarray. For over 40 years, she made 15 to 20 pies every spring, wrapped them in foil, and labeled them for the recipients. The size of the pie you got was a measure of her affection for you. Their doorbell would begin ringing at noon. The first to drop by would be Uncle Nick, Aunt Carmela, and Cousin Barbara. And then all the relatives from Long Island, Queens, and Brooklyn would come by for a warm Easter pie fresh from the oven. Her mother died from open heart surgery at the age of 78, and so did the making of Easter pies, for Elvira never learned how. After the funeral, she and her husband started that familiar routine of going through her mother's belongings, emptying the drawers, the cabinets and shelves, deciding what to keep, what to give away, what to throw out. They donated her furniture, clothes, and pots and pans to charity. They weren't expecting to discover a fortune because her mother lived on next to nothing. But they were wrong. They did discover a fortune. They opened the freezer, and there they were. Her mom had saved 2 pies, one for herself labeled with her name on it. Elvira put them in a plastic bag and rushed them home. That night, gathered with her son and daughter at the dining room table, she brought in one of the pies, steaming hot, emitting a savory aroma. She sliced a wedge for each family member, and they scraped their plates for crumbs. Says Elvira, I had eaten my mother's pies every spring my whole life, and they always tasted good. But now, flavored with grief, that pie somehow tasted better than it ever had. With each bite, I recalled with fresh clarity everything my mother had meant to me over the years. How she had raised me without a husband around, all the while toiling as a seamstress, and especially how she lavished love and attention on her adoring grandchildren. I'd never in my life felt so grateful to anyone. Through the pies, she had expressed her love for family and friends, nourishing body and soul. Eating the pie that night felt almost sacramental, as if I could taste her spirit. After dinner, Elvira waved her family into the kitchen and opened the door to the freezer and pointed to the back. There it was, the last of Mom's pies, the one with her name on it. That pie has stayed back there wrapped in foil for 9 years now. Untouched, unseen, but never forgotten. Now, some families leave insurance policies behind, or furniture, or jewelry, but Elvira Brody's mother left her family her Easter pie. That's her legacy, that pie, and all the memories and meaning it represents. We have many different legacies. There's our genetic legacy. Each of us has inherited traits encoded in our DNA, such as our height, weight, skin color, eye color, hair color and texture, and or baldness, as the case may be. My 4-legged son, Ricky, has inherited my dark eyes and whiskers. We inherit the propensity to have certain diseases, such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart disease, and cancer. As a psychologist, I'm aware that we inherit the propensity to have many psychological conditions. Not only things like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and alcoholism, but even a propensity to have depression and anxiety. We even inherit our basic personality traits. We know this because a child's basic emotional temperament is evident in infancy, before their social environment has had its turn. longitudinal research has shown that our basic temperament remains fairly stable throughout our lifetime. From the beginning of their young lives, some babies are extroverted, sociable, outwardly focused. Some are introverted, shy, and reserved. Some are excitable, reacting strongly to whatever happens. And we tend to stay that way throughout our lives. The Genome Project has demonstrated that all of us humans share 99.9% of the same genetic traits. So, when we assert that we are more alike than different, we are not simply making a statement of faith, but a statement of fact. And yet, think about how many tears have been shed and how much blood has been spilled over that 0.1% of difference. So, our families pass on to us, say, genetic inheritance. They also pass on to us a cultural legacy, as do our communities, religions, schools, institutions, and the media. Our culture patterns our thinking, feeling, valuing, and behavior in obvious and subtle ways. To a large extent, our culture determines where we live, what we eat, how we earn, save, and spend money, how we relax, what makes us feel safe and fulfilled, how we measure self-esteem, success, failure, and happiness, how we define family, friendship, love, health, and illness, what we believe about God, ultimate reality, life, and death. Now, these are existential questions, and that they are issues that limit the human existence at all times and places. And yet our particular way of addressing these concerns is largely provided by our culture. Our denomination's recent anti-racism work has impressed upon me how unconscious we are of our cultural influences. For example, in our culture, the taller a man is, the more attractive, intelligent, competent, and successful he is deemed to be. And it's assumed that he would make a good leader. And perhaps you've read of the recent research performed at the University of North Carolina, which has analyzed 8 years of data encompassing more than 1 million cases from the New York Police Department's controversial Stop and Frisk program. The researchers found that for black men, these assumptions do not apply. In fact, tall black men are more likely to be viewed as threatening than tall white men. And the taller a black man is, the more threatening he appears. These racial biases, which are carried by white and black Americans, are just a few of the thousands of ways our culture indoctrinates us without our knowledge or consent. Which is why, if we want to be self-aware, we need to engage in consciousness raising of the white supremacy which permeates our culture even now in 2022. Our culture is like the pond we swim around in. It's always there. And everyone else we know swims around in the same pond. And we don't notice what makes our pond distinct from other ponds. We assume our values, our ways of living life, and our ways of collecting our collective life are the one right way, the natural order of things, maybe even the divine order of the universe. You usually have to visit, if not live in another culture, to notice the differences. For instance, our American culture is very competitive and individualistic, whereas some other cultures place greater value on cooperation with others and the well-being of the group, and not just the individual. Which is why I suspect that we're the only industrialized nation in the world without universal health care. Our culture is extremely materialistic compared to some cultures that cherish people, relationships, and community more than stuff. Our culture treasures accomplishment, achievement, efficiency, and getting things done more than some that treasure taking the time to enjoy the present moment. In many ways, mostly consciously, we pass on our cultural legacy to the next generation. And then, of course, we have our material inheritance, which is the most popular usage of the word, which reflects our society's values. I love that first sticker I sometimes see on the back of RVs. I'm spending my children's inheritance. Thank goodness members of this congregation didn't feel that way. Was that an act of faith or what? A small, courageous, ragtag band of religious liberals from Hilton Head, Lufton, and Beaufort gathered in the home of Francis and Dick Caldwell on October 22nd, 1977, for this stated purpose, quote, to establish a format, structure, and more permanent meeting place or places based on the preference of all in attendance to assure a more consistent sharing of thoughts, questions, and friendship that we Hilton Head Unitarians have been pouring into ourselves far too long. Does that sound like a Unitarian statement or what? And shortly thereafter, this group applied to the Unitarian Universalist Association for a charter. And the Unitarian Fellowship of Hilton Head was founded with 18 charter members. Former historian John Hinchcliffe recorded, quote, to put the fellowship on a sound financial basis, $1 was collected from each member. Don't tell the Pledge Drive Committee that. For the next 12 years, members met in a variety of places, including Sea Pines Academy, Sea Pines Montessori, a restaurant, the Methodist Church, and the Marriott Center office building. Finally, in 1991, the fellowship contracted with Beth Temple Young to use their building as the meeting place. In 2003, the fledgling Unitarian Fellowship of Hilton Head made two far-reaching decisions. One, to form a search committee to hire a full-time minister. And two, develop a capital campaign to build its own church building. In 2006, the Reverend Thomas Schmidt, a UU minister from California, was called as its first full-time minister. And in the following year, 2007, under the leadership of co-presidents Anthony Serpy and Linda Nelson, the fellowship moved into its new facilities. And the group decided to change its name to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Low Country. Were any of you around back then when this building became your church in 2007? If so, would you please stand so that we may show our appreciation to you? Thank you. Thank you. You know, I think it's easy to have faith in God. If God is a supernatural, omniscient, omnipotent, transcendent being, then anything is possible. But it's a different matter to have faith in yourself, to believe that come what may, you will have what it takes to see it through. And this group had what it took. Now there's a pernicious myth that our individualistic culture teaches us. It's the myth of the self-made person. That is a lie. No person is self-made. All of us, every single one of us, is the beneficiary of those who have gone before us and paved the way. Usually they are unknown and forgotten. But our ignorance and forgetfulness should not lead us to indulge in the fantasy that we did it all by ourselves. There is grace at work in the universe. And you don't have to believe in God or even be religious to acknowledge grace, to recognize that before us and beside us are encouragers, sustainers, redeemers, teachers, and guides that make the way possible, and without whom we would be lost. So not only are we financially obligated to pass on this spiritual home, but we are morally obligated because we need to say thank you for the sacrifice and generosity and faith of those who came before us. So we have a genetic and a cultural and a material inheritance. We also have a spiritual legacy. The way our soul nourishes the souls who follow. Let me make a confession. It may sound morbid, but don't you love it when ministers make confessions? My confession is this. I actually enjoy officiating memorial services. For me, it's a sacred privilege to help a grieving family and a congregation remember, celebrate, and give thanks for a life and all the ways that life has nourished our souls. I know that many religions speculate on the life to come and what it may be like, if there is one. Now, we Jews don't deny that there may be an afterlife, but we choose to honor the one and only life we know for sure. Spiritual legacies are often passed on through material legacies, like Elvira Brody's mother's Easter pies. Those frozen pies, wrapped in tinfoil, transmitted her mother's spirit. And eating that pie was sacramental. I use that word intentionally because a sacrament is something tangible that becomes transparent to something sacred. You can see through it to the holy. In those frozen pies, Elvira Brody could see her mother's self-sacrifice and her love for her daughter and grandchildren and her extended family. I have a similar sacrament in my possession. It's the book of sermons, written and autographed by Harry Emerson Fosdick, the eminent minister of the Riverside Church in New York City, published in 1958. Fosdick was my first introduction to liberal Christianity, and reading his books began my long slide down that slippery slope to Unitarian Universalism. Now, the person who gave me this book, and a dozen of Fosdick's other books, was John Ryberg, the liberal, please listen, the liberal minister of the First Baptist Church in my hometown, Smithfield, North Carolina. He was something of a mentor to me. I would say even a father figure. He was my speech writing and speech making coach as I competed in various national public speaking contests. But more than that, he taught me that faith without works is dead, and that individual salvation without social transformation is a dead religion that deserves to die. But his most influential spiritual legacy for me was his belief in me at a time in my life when I couldn't believe in myself. I can still hear his somber voice as though it were yesterday. Neal, you can be anything you set your mind to. And I saw in his eyes that he meant it. He really believed it. And because he believed in me, I was eventually able to believe in myself. John Riper is one of the people in my life who saved me. And whenever I open this book of sermons and see John Ryberg's underlinings and his handwritten notes in the margins, his spirit and spirit of Harry Emerson Fosdick rise up within me. This book is a sacrament to me. If my house were ever to catch fire, this book would be one of the first things I would try to rescue. This building that you're in right now is a sacrament. It's much more than brick and mortar. It is transparent to something sacred. This is where you gather each week to worship, to hold up those things of ultimate worth, which is where the word worship comes from, worth and worship. This is where you dedicate and teach your children. Marry the one you love, and remember your loved ones who have passed on. This is where you gather around potlucks and book discussions and experience a community that respects you and accepts you as you are, without requiring you to believe things you can't believe. This is where you search for truth and meaning on your terms in a way that's relevant and makes sense. This is where you affirm the awe and wonder of your lives and of life itself without trying to reduce the mystery to canned creeds and bland dogmas. This is where you affirm the dignity and worth of every person in the midst of a culture that tries to reduce our value to dollars and cents. This is where you recognize the interdependent web of existence in a world that tries to separate us from each other and from nature. This place is a sacrament that you want to preserve and pass on to the next generation so that it can nourish their souls as much as it has nourished yours. And so the question for each of us is, what kind of pies will you and I leave behind in the freezer? Amen.
And this was after I had visited antique stores in Kittery, Maine. The ancestors, old photographs, cracked, curled, and piled in wooden boxes, stacked on dusty shelves in corners of antique shops. These portraits, once proudly held in carefully selected frames. Here are the answers, unclaimed, forgotten. Vitality one sees has long departed. We face each other wordlessly, and I am mesmerized, pondering, yearning for more. I want their stories revealed like good fiction, to know the elegant woman with clear, strong eyes, her cares and intentions hidden as she holds herself erect in her crisp white blouse. To see if the stiff, stern-eyed man in his parlor, moments before posing, was light-hearted, adjusting his hair, tamping down his pipe, telling the children, "Take Fido and wait in the kitchen a while." These faces, though unknown, unrelated to my own, I cannot help but wonder at the musings they provide and what significance is hidden in the stories of all our lives. Perhaps we're drawn into these homeless portraits, boundaries blurring, heart knowing the inevitable, the ending of being oneself remembered, of being the portrait fading out of memory, and of losing all we know of who and what we are and were, and why. Perhaps there is a longing to uncover the good father, the graceful mother, wise and patient, jovial cousins, all of whom watch your back, the fantasy family we wish we might have had or did in another life. Or do we hunger for deeper meanings of life that these souls, all our relations, have faced throughout their lifetimes? Pondering morphs to wondering, why have we always created mythology, art, symphonies, or panoramas so vast they take our breath away? Some moments fill us with the energy or passion that lifts us higher, briefly. In these short-lived moments, we are lovers of life, filling up a vacuum with our love. We inhale deeply when we witness perfection. In celebrating the ancestors, I celebrate all of us, past, present, future, as one. For we are all one, connected by a universal love. The fine arts are one of the venues that remind us of our love and seem to breathe eternity into our blood, heartbeats, and all precious present moments.
Thank you so much for that, Pamela. And now we'll begin our Day of the Dead ceremony, which is a celebration of life, a memorial service where we can share with each other memories that are represented by these pictures and items on this table. Next year, a bigger table. Anne, would you like to start with the picture of the,
I could.
yes,
Yeah.
picture of the ancestors of this church? And then I would invite you to come forward as you do with the joys and concerns. Okay.
In the center, you'll see Mary Moser, who is alive and very active, and I don't know if she's watching. She is also included in this frame. But Gwen Mays and Dorothy Find, Emmanuel and Olive Holland, and Patricia Atwood are people who I have spent many hours of my life with. They nourished my soul, I guess, so that I can live on and nourish the soul of others.
Thanks, Ann. And if now you'll come forward if you have someone or something on this table that you'd like to tell us about. Don't all rush.
My name is Lynn Nordenberg, and I would like to remember this morning David Nesbitt Matthews, who was my ex-husband's cousin. He was one of my favorite people in the world, and I named my cat after him. I named him Nesbitt, called him Mr. Bitt. But when I met David, I was a college student, and he was about a decade older. He was selling shirts at Strauss's department store in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, and following his passion of doing community theater. He did community theater in Newcastle since he was a little boy. And ultimately, he became the director of the Erie Playhouse. He was such a Pied Piper that a dozen people moved from Newcastle to Erie when he got that position because they wanted to be near him. He was a joyful person, wonderful musician, actor. He could bring out the best in people. He encouraged people who had never done anything to take his place. And what I brought with me today is a CD from 1776, where in 1970, April of 1970, I went on one of his bus tours. He took bus tours to New York City twice a year. And the people who went loved theater, but they didn't particularly have a lot of money. And so the first night and the last night were spent on the bus so that we didn't have to encourage the expense of a hotel. And then the main money that we spent was going to shows. We went to 2 shows a day. And these were wonderful experiences. After I divorced my husband, I didn't get to see David too much. But he did come to my daughter's wedding 3 years ago, so I got to spend some time with him. He died from COVID just about the time that the vaccines became available. So I miss him.
This is Tom. I feel like you all know him, right? You've been through this journey with me. This is Tom. I miss him. These socks I found in my sock drawer the other day. I took them out and put them on the dresser. And every morning now I kiss the socks and say, "Good morning, Tom, I love you." He was a laugher. He laughed at everything. Even things that weren't funny. And I turned to him and said, "It wasn't funny." He was laughing. And he'll stay with me just like my last husband, the guy with cancer. He joked when he got cancer, he said, "You're a black widow." So sense of humor. We joked all the way up until the end. So, Thomas Michael Rapsick. Thank you for letting me share him with you throughout this whole process, and now you get to see what he looks like. Thank you, Diana.
So I had a picture of my parents here, my mother and my father. This was taken probably in the latter part of the 1940s, probably shortly before they were married in Clearwater, Florida. Mother dearly loved Clearwater Beach. That was where she wanted to be buried after she passed. It was her death in my 19th year that so shaped the rest of my life in the work that I did, my understanding of grief and loss, and the whole work of the hospice as well as in ministry. So I attribute her death to where I am today. Mom and Dad, this is Dorothy and Sydney.
This is my mother and my sister and me. My mother was remarkable. She was the best mother anybody ever had. Because my dad I love very much too, and he's not terribly reliable, but mother always saw us through. When they told the vice mother she couldn't keep the house, she did. She made all our clothes. She could do anything. She could reupholster furniture. And she taught me that I could do anything. And when Skip and I first went in business and we were very poor and the roof leaked, his crazy uncle and I put a new roof on the house because my mother taught me I could do anything. And the three of us, the older we got, the more fun we had together. And this is us on an outing in Charleston. I love my dad too. He just went his ease.
These are 4 puppy dogs who were in my life for a long time, 17 years. And they filled a big void in my life during those 17 years. And I couldn't have loved them anymore. And it's, these 2 were brothers, Tommy and Bamboo. Then there was, Tommy and Henley, Bamboo and Neal. And 2 of them lived somewhere else, but they spent most of their time with me. And I couldn't have been happier. I didn't realize how much I loved them until I started losing them. And that often happens.
This photo was taken at Star Island in 2017 when we went there. This is a photo of me and my husband, Ron Titus. Ron died December 29th, 2018. In life, he was honest, hardworking, trustworthy, responsible, and sometimes very funny. A comedian. And Ron was a very good photographer. Although photography was not his main occupation, but he left us with many really good photos of our family. And we call him our family photographer. And although some of you may not know this, but since we have been living here, since 2009, Ron was our UU church photographer. Many of the photos around here that you see, photos of members, events, social gatherings, special get-togethers, work projects, etc., were taken by Ron Titus.
That's him.
I don't have an item on the table, but I wanted to briefly remember my brother, Brian Crow, that I lost 3 years ago. Some of you may have indirectly known him. He created and hosted a show on NPR on Irish music. So you've heard him at some point. And then my parents, Ray and Mildred Crow, my dad wrote short humorous verse that was put in a lot of the southeastern newspapers. So while I didn't bring an item, I'll leave you with one of his little witticisms. Most were like 10, 15 lines long, but this was a short one. It was, it only takes a smidgen to make you hate a pigeon.
I'm Skip Minchie, and these are too small to see, and they're very old and faded. I have pictures here of my mother and father holding me in front of an old car and looking very much like Bonnie and Clyde. This is another picture of me and my little sister and my mother and my grandmother and my great-grandmother standing in front of a boarding house on Liberty Street in Savannah, which my grandmother owned. And this is the same grandmother who paid my way through college. Thank you, Granny. Gave me a career for many decades. I'm eternally grateful. And my mother, who was always on my side even when she shouldn't have been. I miss them all, and like Neal said, our ancestors are a part of us. Every one of them I remember and feel. And when I go and get up every morning and look in the mirror, there's my dad looking right back at me.
His mother called him her precious angel, darling sugar pie.
Oh,
this is a picture of the Bobcat. When I worked at Moon Doggies for 12 years, Bobcat was there when I began work, and Bobcat was there when I ended. Bobcat is a Manx, so that's how he got his name Bob. His tail was Bob. Anyway, he was a tiny little thing when I first started, and then he grew, and he was at the restaurant, and so I sort of took charge of feeding him pretty much every day that I was there, 5 days a week anyway. And when the restaurant closed, Bobcat was still hanging around. The people that had bought the restaurant and worked for about a year, and they were sort of looking out for him. I would go up maybe 2 or 3 times a week just to make sure he had food and water and stuff at the porch. And this is some of his hair. I was privileged to hold him while he was put to sleep.
or two more. You probably can believe this, but I forgot when we were in the month. So, we get paid every week. So we do get here on Sundays, but all that said, I didn't bring a picture or pictures. I'm going to back into why I'm standing up here in just a moment. But I first want to acknowledge my mom and dad. They passed away a while ago, but it's still fresh memories. Like a lot of young people back in the early 40s, my dad went off to war, and towards the end of the war, he's actually was working towards being an officer. If you were an officer, you weren't supposed to get married, but he did. So I already knew he was a Unitarian. And then, so after 1945, 2 years later, my sister Chris was born. Christine Marie Kelly. And she lived to be pretty good age, 75. She was the first of 6. But she was an only child for 5 years. So she lived a different life than we do, because starting in 1952, the chaos began. And 5 more kids came coming along. By 1963, I think my mom said enough. And so my older sister, Chris, married a guy, her second husband, John Powers. So Christine Powers passed away on August 25th. And I miss her. She was quite a gal, only 5'3", so I had a foot on her. She was always tall in my eyes. She was not only smart, she was smart. She was wise. Very active in the community, loved her family. And very active with the grandchildren, right to the very end. So, thank you, Chris. And I just want to pass.
Okay. Come forward. We're going past 11. I need to stop this. Hi, I'm Tish. It's my aunt and uncle. And they took me in because my father died when I was 3, and we moved in with my grandparents, and apparently my brothers were fine, but I was a bit of a handful. So they had no children, so they took me in and gave me unconditional love. They've been gone a while, I really have to miss them. Joe and Carmen were around. Oh, and we made the Easter pies for the bread. I have the recipe.
This is a picture of my husband, Neal. He passed away 8 years ago, and we would have celebrated our 62nd wedding anniversary later on this week. But the Dia de los Muertos has a very special meaning for me. We spent a year of our lives in Mexico. It was Rolf's first sabbatical year from the University of Minnesota, and he wanted a place that was warm and a little exotic and inexpensive to do some writing. Luckily, he did get a grant, and we decided to go to Cuernavaca, and we were able to rent a very lovely home. He taught philosophy at a private school, so our kids had a very good education. Actually, my daughter skipped a grade when she came back to the U.S. But it was a wonderful year. We had a Volkswagen camper and a golden retriever, and we traveled throughout Mexico and Cuernavaca, and also Guatemala, and visited a lot of the archaeological sites. So Dia de los Muertos has a special meaning to me. Oh, and one other thing, I bought a copy of one of his books. He was able to start writing this book in Cuernavaca.
he made a little more money than he used to. And my parents were very frugal despite this. They saved their money. And they sent my brother and I for higher education. That was very important to them. And it was just as important to them that I was educated as my brother was. And I look back on that, and I really appreciate it because I was a girl, and not all families felt that way. So my dad died, and my mom lived till she was 83. And she had a flu, she got pneumonia, she was taken to the hospital, and on the way to the hospital, she developed a blood clot in her leg. And we were told that she couldn't have that blood clot operated on because of her pneumonia. So we were told that she would have to have her leg amputated. She was 83 once she recovered from the pneumonia. And I said to the doctor, and this was in Canada, by the way, I said to the doctor, does she have a choice? And he said, he thought, he was silent, and he thought for a long time. And this was before there was medically assisted death like there is now in Canada. This was before that. And he said, yes, she does have a choice. So we went to her and we said, you can continue to live and be treated for the pneumonia, but you will have to have your leg amputated. Or you cannot be treated for the pneumonia and you will die. And what do you choose to do? And she said, right away, I know exactly what I want to do. I want to give my children one last gift. And so that's what she chose to do. She took her 5 days to die, but she did not want us to have the burden of helping her live that way. And she also wanted to not use all of their remaining money to care for herself. She wanted to leave it to us. And so that was her legacy. That was her last gift. And I'm just so grateful to both of my parents. We wouldn't have the income to keep supporting ourselves in our retirement if it hadn't been for them. And the love they left us with, of course, was the most important.
Well, I think we need to draw this to a close. I have my brothers here. They were pretty big when I was born. So when they went off to college, I was an only child. I'm the bald one in the pictures and the shortest one. They were great. Every girl should have a big brother. And there are a lot more loved ones up here, and hopefully after the service you'll be able to come forward and take a look at the love on this table. And now, Charlie.
So, John, if it's okay, let's do verses 1 and 4, first and last verses of this hymn. Start of the morning. If you would please take your hymnals into your hands. Hymn 289, Creative Love, Our Thanks We Give. If you would please stand if you're able, willing. And then we sing verses 1 and 4, first and last.
Creative love,
Neal, thank you so much for that message, man. That was fabulous. And I have laid my hands to your definition of a sacrament, and will make it a part of me, something tangible that points through it to something sacred. Yes, indeed. Wonderful, wonderful insights. Those of you who would like to stay for the talk back, please do so. I think you will find a meaningful conversation that will take place there. Pam, thank you for your words. They're rich and sweet and deep and full. And I also want to draw your attention to my rainbow socks and thank Wes for the multicolored things that are on my feet. Take note of those, and if they make you smile, thank Wes Brady for that. I think that brings us to a close here, if I can now. And Neal, if you would, closing remarks.
Thank you, Charlie, and thank those of you who shared your appreciation of how some people in your life have nourished your souls. Our closing words are by Arthur Graham. Each of us is an artist whose task it is to shape life in some semblance of the pattern of our dreams. Making is not of the self alone, but of shared tomorrows and times we shall never see. So let us be about our task. The materials are very precious and perishable. Amen.
I'd like you all to stand and join me in extinguishing the challenge. While we extinguish this flame, we still carry in our hearts the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment until we are together again.